Every once in a while, we do a story on strange cults that have popped up here and there. A while back, we did one on the Heaven's Gate cult, which was headed up by Marshall Applewhite. There was a strange one for sure. Then we did one about the Brides of Christ. If you haven't heard about that one yet, head over to graveyarddance.com, click the video's link and scroll back. You're welcome. This week's story is right up there with the most awful cults we've ever covered. To say this guy and his followers were screwed in the head would be the understatement of the century. This is usually the part where we say, sit back, grab a beverage and snack of choice and enjoy the video, but when you hear some of the things this guy did, I highly doubt you'll want anything to eat. We always put that warning in front of our videos saying that this may be disturbing to some viewers, but this week, we really mean it. It will be especially troubling to those who have kids and hold them dear to their hearts. With all that said, on to today's story. Jeffrey Lungren was an American cult leader and convicted murderer who gained notoriety for his involvement in a series of brutal killings known as the Kirtland Cult murders. Born on May 3, 1950, in Independence, Missouri, Lungren grew up in a strict religious household and became deeply immersed in the teachings of the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, RLDS Church, a sect of the Latter-day Saint movement. According to Lungren, as well as some of his former neighbors, he was severely abused as a child, particularly by his father. Lungren was, by most accounts, a loner when he was in middle and high school. He became an expert hunter when he began to spend time with his father as a teenager, becoming knowledgeable in the use and maintenance of firearms. Lungren enrolled at Central Missouri State University, and spent time at a house that was specially built for RLDS youth. While at the house, he became friends with Alice Keeler and Keith Johnson. Keeler, who had also been abused by her father, quickly bonded with Lungren, and the couple married in 1970. On December 2, 1970, the couple's first child, a boy, was born. By 1974, Keeler was pregnant for the second time. Alice had already started to notice some strange things about her new husband. The first thing was he was a pathological liar. He lied about literally everything, ranging from being at school when he had already dropped out to being at work when he wasn't even employed. She was taught to stand by her man no and to not question a man's authority in marriage. Sadly for her, lying was the least of his issues. Intimacy was about to become a huge issue as well. I know we have a lot of kids who watch this channel, so I'm going to dust over this topic very, very lightly. Let's just say he had a fascination with bodily functions and wearing his wife's clothing as well as pretending to be his wife at times, and we can just leave it at that. If you want details, there's books about him out there. Either way, he was an oddball to say the least. Lungren's path to criminality began when he started to develop a messianic complex, believing that he was chosen by God for a special purpose. In the late 1980s, Lungren formed his own religious sect, which he called the House of Prayer, and began attracting followers. He convinced his followers that he had received divine revelations and that he was a modern-day prophet. In 1987, Lungren's group moved to Kirtland, Ohio, a historic town with religious significance to the Latter-day Saint movement. Lungren convinced his followers that they needed to gather in Kirtland to prepare for the apocalypse. He promised them that they would be saved from the impending doomsday if they followed his instructions without question. Under Lungren's influence, his followers became completely devoted to him and his teachings. They willingly handed over their assets and surrendered control of their lives to him. This even went as far as separating men from their wives and children from their parents. He had his way with all the women of the group and kept the men segregated. Lungren's charismatic personality and manipulative tactics allowed him to maintain a tight grip on his followers, who were isolated from their families and the outside world. As time went on, Lungren's prophecies became more extreme, and he began to advocate violence as a means of achieving salvation. He convinced his followers that they needed to eliminate a family of 5, the Avery family, who he claimed were enemies of the cult. On April 17, 1989, Lungren and his followers lured the Averys to a rented farmhouse where they were bound, tortured, and ultimately murdered. He had his followers first ask for the father, Dennis, to come out to the barn to talk to him. When he got there, he had to see the large hole dug in the center of the barn. He was quickly tied up and blindfolded and told to get down in the hole. Can you imagine the horror he must have felt seeing all this and knowing that he was going to die, but even worse, knowing that the same would most likely happen to his beloved wife and children? And that's exactly what happened. One by one, starting with Dennis, then his wife Cheryl, then each of the children, starting with the oldest, 15-year-old Trina, then 13-year-old Becky, and then sadly, 6-year-old Karen. They had a chainsaw running to mask the sounds of the gunshots, so each person had no idea what they were walking into until they were right there. This would have been terrifying to an adult, but can you imagine the absolute horror these poor kids experienced right before the rest of their lives were blatantly robbed from them? The sickening thing is, there was no reason for it. He already had the family's money. If he didn't like them, throw them out of the cult. Why harm them, especially the children? The bodies of Dennis Avery, his wife Cheryl, and their 3 daughters were discovered in a makeshift grave on Lundgren's property. The discovery led to the unraveling of the cult and the arrest of Lundgren and several of his followers. Lundgren was charged with multiple counts of aggravated murder and kidnapping, among other crimes. During his trial, Lundgren defended his actions, claiming that he was carrying out God's will. However, the jury rejected his religious justifications and found him guilty on all counts. In 1990, he was sentenced to death. Lundgren's case garnered significant media attention, both for its religious cult aspects and the heinous nature of the crimes. It also led to increased scrutiny of cults and their potential for manipulation and violence. Despite multiple appeals, Lundgren's death sentence was upheld, and he was executed by lethal injection on October 24, 2006. His case serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of charismatic leaders who exploit vulnerable individuals for their own sinister purposes and the devastating consequences that can result from the blind devotion of followers.